And a very good evening to you, good night to some of you, good afternoon to others. Welcome to Politics 101. Late start tonight. We had some glitches, but we are here, better late than never, as they say. We have a number of guests tonight, and I'm sorry to keep them waiting. I see Apostle London is on, and we expect Dion Abrams to be joining us. Rickford Burke is expected to join us too at some point. Welcome to Politics 101. It's a Monday evening. Again, we apologize for a late start. But I think Rickford Burke, hello? Yes, okay. All right. Just catching up with some of our guests. Yes. We are on. Please share the link. We're getting a late start. Hello? Good. We're starting now. We had a late start. Yes, we got a late start today, so we're ready to go now. Thank you. Welcome to all of you. These things happen sometimes. You get caught up. Welcome. It's Monday. It's the fourth week of the teachers' strike. And what we say, the day after MASH. MASH was on Friday, and we're back to the struggle now. And so we continue our coverage. Apostle London is here. Let's start the conversation right away. Apostle, good evening.
Greetings to you and to those who are viewing. Thank you as always for having me here with you.
Yes, and we are now into the fourth week of the strike. Some developments since we last spoke. The teachers union, of course, went to court. The court has put a hold on the moves by the government. The public service union has given the government, well, not an ultimatum, but said to the government, we would like to talk. And one would imagine that if the government does not react to that move, then we are likely to see the public service union contemplating industrial action. We saw some of the teachers might have started to drift back, but based on what we saw today, the fact that the court has told the government not to touch the teacher's salary until the matter is resolved, may have brought some of the teachers back out. But let me start, Apostle, by asking what's happening in Linden. Tell us what's happening on the ground in Linden.
Well, we continue to maintain our resistance and our position, as the teachers do, and the community, wider community, because we understand clearly what this is about. And there is the excitement or budding excitement about what the public service union intends to do, because there are many others here in Region 10 in Linden who are eager to be a part of this movement, what I consider to be justice for the working class. And that's why I process it now in my mind. Economic justice. So here in Linden, the teachers are continuing to be out on the street. They continue to stand. They continue to announce that they are unaccepting of this 6.5 being foisted on them. That 6.5% increase that was across the board to all public servants, but teachers have reacted, and they are not in favor of it. They're voicing their dissatisfaction and continuing to stand in this the fourth week. And we do expect that tomorrow and the days that follow, there'll be an intensification of our response as a community, and then especially we're targeted for many things, but we continue to stand on the
Apostle London, you're
I'm
there?
here.
You're
Yes.
there, right. Apostle London giving us a report on what's happening on the ground there in Linden. The morale of the teachers is still up there.
It still is, because I would like to think that some of them are getting a clearer picture now that Justice Kassoum would have given them some stability in terms of their psyche, that the administration, what they call the government, doesn't have as much power as they want to flaunt themselves as having. So we're not going to cower to say, oh, people cut my salary and the like. So Justice Kassoum has brought some stability to the ship, and the morale is still high because teachers expect, in my view, and based on what I'm hearing, they expect the GPSU to do something that would be even greater than their response. And this now puts the ball heavily in Patrick Yard's hand, because teachers expect them to be supported by the GPSU in a manner that would make the PPP understand that the working class in the public service must be respected and treated as though they have some say in this in their future.
And I'm glad you raised that question. Let me bring in Rickford Burke here. Rickford, good evening.
Good evening to you. Good evening to Apostle London.
Yes, I'm glad, Apostle, that you raised that question. That teachers are now getting a clearer picture. You know, I know you've been ringing the bell. I have been ringing the bell. Rickford has been ringing the bell, and many others. You know, struggle is not a straightforward thing. You know, and I know we are in the era of social media. We're in the media of instant politics and so on. And people get very impatient. They want something to happen every day. And don't realize that we are dealing with human beings, and by our very nature, we are a complex being. And so our politics are complex. You know, the teacher, you know, whose salary is already low, and for the government to say, you go out and strike, I'm going to take out. That teacher instinctively is studying my rent, my child clothes, food. You see? And that teacher, unless he or she is given some assurance, will likely to say, well, boy, I support the strike, but I got to go out. And so what the challenge for us becomes very, very complex, because the PPP is using this tactic of fear and inducement. And when you put that together, driving fear in people and then inducing them with little small gifts, it's really a hell of a brew that the government is using. And sometimes I think we have to stay with our people and talk them through. So many teachers I have talked over the weekend to explain the court ruling to them. They heard that the court ruling is in their favor, but they couldn't quite, because they're teachers, they're not lawyers, right? All they know is that all they're asking is, so they can't touch we pay. No, they can't touch your pay, and here is why. And that's why I say to my social media brothers and sisters who have this platform, our job is not to be union bosses.
Right.
Our job is to explain things to people and to encourage them. Leave the tactics and the strategy to the union bosses. And what we need to do is to explain what that court ruling means and what it means for your salary and how the courts operate and so forth. So I'm so glad that you went there. Rickford, we haven't spoken since this strike. So I will allow you to give me your own perspective on the strike since it started 3 weeks ago. What are some of the lessons that we are learning? What impact you think the strike is having?
Well, thanks for having me, and good night to your listeners. The first thing that impacted me was the government's stance against the teachers. Just before they came to power, Priya Mani-Chan, now the Minister of Education, joined the teacher strike under the Granger administration. Now she's condemning it. Under the Granger administration, the teachers were awarded a large sum in terms of percentage, and the lower teachers at the lower end of the salary scale got the highest percentage. And now this government is saying, okay, everybody takes 6% across the board. Coretta McDonald, when she was on my show, outlined 26, I think, measures that the union has been trying to negotiate to be implemented by the government. The government has said, well, we implemented 16, when in fact they have not. What they have done is some of the things that the union has been trying to get implemented by the government might be covered under some other program. And so they're claiming that they've met the demands and they've not. And then you juxtapose that with when they were in opposition again in Parliament. You had Bart Jagdale jumping up and demanding that the teachers get 50%. And then Irfan Ali, in this famous outburst in Parliament, yelled and screamed they must get 50%. And now they're in power. They have oil resources, far more money than the Granger administration, and they're refusing to give the teachers any money. I think it's tinged with some element of race. Most of these teachers are Afro-Guyanese teachers. The PUP governs as an ethnocracy where they want to use the resources of of the nation only for their ethnic collective or ethnic supporters. And most notably, I think they're dismissing the teachers' demand. They're so disrespectful and contemptuous. And so they want to break the will of the teachers and they're ignoring them in the belief, I think, that at some point in time, they'll get tired and they'll get frustrated of being on the street in the sun and rain and not receiving the attention of the government. And so they're waiting out the teachers' patience. What the government is doing is a violation of the law. The Labor Relations Act requires conciliation whenever there's industrial action. And I'm not sure that the way the law is arranged can work now, because clearly we see that this government is not respecting the labor laws. And maybe what should happen coming out of this is that the responsibility for labor conciliation should be removed from the Ministry of Labor. And we need an independent body to take that kind of action in the state on behalf of the state whenever there's industrial action. Because you have the Labor Ministry that's part of the government ignoring the law, which mandates that under any industrial action taken by any body, whether it's in the public or private sector, that department engages in conciliation, brings the parties together, have them start to negotiate. On the instructions of the government, the Ministry of Labor is not doing that, and they're violating the law. And maybe since the government wants to wait the teachers out and ignore the teachers, the GTU should move to the court to get a mandamus writ and mandating the Labor Ministry to carry out its functions in accordance with the law. So what they should do is go to court and file a motion compelling the Ministry of Labor to bring the parties together to engage in conciliation. What we're seeing here is scary. It's scary. It gives you vibes of Putin's Russia, where you have this government, and they're not even scared, they're not even embarrassed. You have US government officials there, you have Saudi government officials there, you have United Nations officials there, you have at least 15 CARICOM heads of government and or their representatives in Guyana, and this government is disrespecting the nation's teachers, ignoring their demands, saying they don't have a right to an increase in salary. The president saying, oh, they must wait. Barjak, they're weighing in. He's the minister of everything. And we've reached a point now where, Dr. Hines, I really think the people in Guyana have to broaden their political action to the Caribbean, to the international community. We're the ones doing it in North America. But I think this demonstrates to me that this government thinks that they're inevitable. They think that they're invincible. They think that their dominance is permanent. They think that they are in control, and the people have no say. So we're in a communist state where the government think that everything they do is right, and the people must be dictated to, and they, as servants of the people, must not be moved by the demands of the people. It's scary, and it seems to me that this is not going to end until we dislodge this government.
Rickford Burke here saying it's scary what we see the government doing. And I think he's been tongue in cheek there, because Rickford Burke and others like himself for the last 3 years have been saying that this government is scary. And we should not be surprised that this government is doing scary things, because it's a dictatorship. We should not be surprised, and no report is not being surprised, that this government doesn't care who is in the country when it disrespect, because some of the very forces that are in the country today colluded with the regime change in 2020. And a few of us have been raising that question of regime change and saying we are reaping. And people don't want to go there. There are two things. There's some people who are in solidarity with the teachers, but they don't want to go to two places. They don't want to go to the authoritarianism of the government, because it will take you back to 2020 and regime change. And they don't want to go to race, because it will take you back to the regime change. And I'm bringing you in here, Pastor London, and I notice the Abrams is with us, for you to talk about the subtext of this strike in terms of race and dictatorship. How this strike has been able to bring to the fore in ways that even our supporters, who by instinct and by experience know that there is racism, they know that there is dictatorship. But as human beings, sometimes it's too scary for us to say it's happening in our country. And when it's happening, we're saying, no, it can't be. It can't be. Race and authoritarianism. Over to you, Pastor London.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hines. And I must say that the reality, because of my living here, about which you just spoke, is not necessarily disheartening, but it's just, to some extent, alarming to know that adults are afraid to process what they see. And that's the best way I would put it at this time. It is not that they do not see it. They are afraid because once they process it, it doesn't just make them think that they have to accept what it is. Because some of them, given a natural tendency, will be, I have to react to what I've processed. And they don't want to react to what they process, because once they process correctly, they know that they are just next in line to face the wrath or the ills of a dictatorial body of people. And the other thing I discovered in Guyana is that persons are afraid to discuss the race issue. Priya Manichan brought it to the fore with the hairstyle thing, where she said, listen, this is a necessary discussion. But it seems as if only the PPP has the right to raise the discussion about ethnic discrimination and impartiality. She brought it to the fore that only one group of people stand to suffer when it came to the hairstyle issue, or necessarily those of kinky hair, as they call them, and all the rest of it. Now, when it comes to teachers, we know that the public service is predominantly African descendant. That's a fact. It's irrefutable. We also know that the PP has the nature of saying, okay, even if they have to have some casualties, in reference to ethnic casualties, I call them. So if a few of the Indo brothers have to suffer, they'll make them suffer as long as they stand with African descendants. So there's a lesson to be learned. Don't you dare go standing among African people to talk against your party, because we make you suffer. Yeah. And the only recourse you have in the future is to come back bowing and kissing our feet and speaking against those who you call the PNCB. That's what they process. The other thing is the authoritarianism of this administration. It is so glaring that people are seeing it and thinking, this can't be for real.
Yes, yeah.
And that's what I think has happened to many Guyanese, where they're observing what they've never seen. Such a crass, disrespectful, uncaring, unkind, and uncouth group of people.
Yeah.
Who believe they can do whatever they want to adults. So it's twofold. One, in my view, persons are afraid of processing what they actually see, because they know exactly what it is. And secondly, they know that if they process correctly, they'll have to act in some way or the other. They have to do something about it. And the third part, I should say, is where those of our Indian brothers and sisters of Indian descent who understand that this has gone beyond what it is, what it seems to be. We have to do something. They know the repercussions that are at play here are that you're standing with African people. That's what's being sold. It's not standing for your right. And we have to address that in all honesty. They're being told you're standing with African people, and by extension, standing with the PNC. That's what they're doing.
Yeah. Dion Abrams, the lessons we are learning from the strike here as it relates to race and authoritarianism. Dion, you're muted. Dion Abrams?
Yes, Dr. Hines. I'm pretty glad that, this racial dimension is brought to the fore. We understand the authoritarian nature of the PPP, but too many times we ignore the racial aspect of it. And when Rickford was saying about the people and the people, I was wondering which people exactly, he's referring to, because in the minds of the PPP, they do not see the collective. The pastor just described the nature of the people in terms of dealing with the few, whom they believe are a few Indians who are participating. But this is bigger now. It's that it's gone beyond a few, all right, East Indians who are in this strike. But you see, it's not only the teachers that they've been dealing with like that. Pastor London is from Linden. He understood when they were treating with the nurses. It's the same kind of attitude, all right? Because in the psyche of the PPP, as lesser human beings, we have no right to challenge them. And as superior beings, I mean, when Nandalal describes himself as a chatri, it brings across a message of how they see themselves, not only in relation to Black people, but Indians who are also of a skin. All right. And so for them, allowing the African man to demonstrate power, bringing them to their knees, is beyond their psychological and religious contemplation. And that is what we're fighting against. All right. They are saying that we will not give in to the Black man. And so this union, even though this strike is across the country, including Amerindians and East Indians and whatever, they are seeing the leadership of the union only, so that even if they give in, because of the other ethnic groups that are there, they are giving in to an African leadership. And that is their dilemma, their problem. And that is how they view everything that is taking place here.
Dion Abrams here dealing with the question of, go ahead, Dion. Sorry, I thought you were. Yes, we have a surprise visit tonight by none other than Mr. Mark Benschop, Benschop Radio, Straight Up. Mark has joined us tonight. Mark, we are talking about the lessons that we are learning from the teacher strike, and we are saying the two things that we are learning is the way in which this government is governing in an authoritarian manner, and the way in which race and racism run through the government's action. And what the teacher strike has shown is they can't hide it much more. It's now coming out into the open. Do you share that view?
Well, it has always been, I agree, yes. Good afternoon to you, Dion and Rickford and Nigel and yourself, Dr. Hines. The traits have always been there. It's the hallmarks of the PPP to behave in this manner. They've always behaved. So there's nothing new what they're doing now with the teacher strike. They did that in 1964 when Gao struck out there on the quarantine, and when they were beating and they killed workers who refused to join their strike. Then they thought it was political, but now almost 60 years after the teachers have a legitimate strike, they're attempting, and Dion has a point. I didn't hear your other esteemed guests, and good evening to all of them there. Rickford seemed to be serious reading for his PhD, probably. Hey, Rickford.
Good night, sir.
Uh,
I'm listening. I'm listening very keenly and attentively to you.
And so there's nothing new. The PPP always have these sort of tricks in their books. And what they thought early o'clock was the race card was going to play. But to their surprise, all teachers of all ethnic groups are out there. Whether in Linden we see them, whether in in Berbice we see them, whether on the quarantine they're there, Region 2 they're there. All teachers. This is not what the PPP thought, and they expected that their support base, of course, they are of the view that their support base are just persons of East Indian descent, would have actually listened to them and their racism. The people aren't. The people are out there. Look at that teacher out in Region 2, Martin, Samaru, and others. Look at the teachers out on the quarantine. This is a mixed thing. And this is what the PPP doesn't like. They don't like the mixture of this our real motto, which is one people, one nation, one destiny. They just do not like it. They want to take us back in 1964 when the PPP guys killed Gunraj, a guy from Manchester village named Gunraj, and one of the Monroes, and all these different things that they did. And the other thing now, they're claiming that this teacher strike is political. While it may not have been politically started or instigated, there's no evidence of such. It is political because they are making a political decision to starve the teachers and to tell the teachers that they're going to push 6.5 down them and that they got to accept. But because the teachers, majority of them are saying 6.5 can't work, they're upset. 6.5 can't work, but they're giving a foreign company 10 years tax exemption. 10 years and expect it to work. If it was Jamaica, the country would have shut down by now. Trinidad would have shut down by now. But we Guyanese want us to come in nice groups, and we want to come intellectual, and we're bright, and we're academics, and we're this, and we're that. Tell them to come out and state their view publicly. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it at all.
And of course, we have a mixed bag. We've been hearing news that at the esteemed schools, the bishops and the queens, that they've not heeded the strike. So we still have to deal with the old elites and the way they see working class struggle in Guyana.
Does it have anything to do, and Dion can respond, or either of your guests as well, does it have to do with because bishops and queens are basically board schools? They're
yes,
run by a board?
That's what I hear people say, that they're run by boards, and so there's a response. But I don't think the fact that they're board schools
that they should
not lend some solidarity to the people's struggle. Rickford, let me come back to you because I think the whole question you raise about broadening the struggle to appeal to constituencies outside of Guyana. Of all the strikes that I have known in my time, going right back to the 1970s, an important aspect of the strike has always been external solidarity. And it's a very important point. But the other important point that I think has to be raised there as we look at the teachers' union and the other unions struggling is that back in the 70s, you had what was called the four unions. It was GAWU, NASI, UGSA at that time, the University of Guyana Union, and CCW. And they were what you call opposition unions. Let's be frank, right? GAWU and NASI were PPP unions, right? Ashton Chase was the big man at NASI. Jagan was the big man at GAWU. UGSA was controlled by the president was Clive Thomas, and you had Jas Ramsamy and Rupert Rupnarain and everybody else. And in the CCW, 40 years later, we can say they were WPA members on the executive of the CCU. So when they were planning strike, they were strategized before. And so, therefore, when you see in 1979 a general strike by the 4 unions, it was because you had the 4 unions grouping. That became the 6 unions when the GPSU and Lincoln Lewis's union joined the 4 unions and became the 6th union. And they prosecuted the 1989 strike against the IMF budget, what you call the ERP strike and so on. When you compare the state of unionism today, in the sense that unions are not even organized in the same old way as unions, much more to organize as groupings. I think when you take all of that into consideration, look at how the government has broken the PSU. We don't like to talk about it, but coming out of the arbitration award of 1999, they set out to break the PSU. The PSU is a shell of what it used to be. And their attempt now is to break the GTU. They are union breakers. That's what they are. And so I'm saying the fact that the teachers have pulled this off is extraordinary, because this government has assaulted trade unions to the point that they are now a shadow of what they used to be. And I'm putting this to all of you, starting with you, Rickford. When you go on strike, when a union goes on strike, they're assuming that the employer is going to respond. At least come to sit down and talk with them. All right? You may not get all of what you ask for, but your assumption is that collective bargaining they will come.
But you know what, Dr. Hines?
Yeah.
They are union breakers when it suits their agenda. The people
Right.
In 2018, they weren't doing that, though. They were calling on the teachers to strike.
Yeah. The point I am making is that this action by the teachers is astronomical in the sense that you're dealing with a brutish government that is prepared to throw everything at those teachers and their union. And so I want you all to respond to that question, to the issue of the government response. I know sometimes we feel that the people should be out there and they should be protesting more and there should be this. I don't think we often pay enough attention to the nature of the government that you are dealing with. I gave the framework there of the PPP of fear and inducement. When you put that together, driving fear in people and then inducing them with little trinkets here, you are really assaulting the human spirit. So I want you all to deal with the question of the nature of the government within the context of this strike. Talking with you, Rickford, then Apostle, then Dion, and then back to Mark.
Well, that's exactly what I was talking about earlier. I want to start by their attempts to break the union. Notice how they got the Auditor General to conveniently issue a statement. All the union records have not been audited. Then Priya Manichan is raising all these concerns about, the union was given a grant of $6 million and they haven't cleared it. And I mean, all these nonsense. They like to imply, the first thing these people do is they like to imply financial impropriety. Throughout the history of the PPP, listen to, even when they attack me, Jack Dale, Nanlal, you thief, money woman, that's them. And the biggest thieves are these guys, The biggest thieves are these guys and the corruption, but they like to attack people with money, right? They go straight to the morality. And then I'm wondering why we don't use the courts more. We should be flooding the courts with action like I just called for. They need to move to the courts to compel the Ministry of Labor to invoke the conciliation statute to bring the government together. That's what the law requires. Whenever there's industrial action, the Ministry of Labor mediates. The government is telling the Ministry of Labor not to mediate. Coretta McDonald has said publicly, the union has written to the ministry 2 times. No response, not even a response. The other thing is, they should take action against the Auditor General. He attempted, the same Auditor General that stood up with Charandas and took a toast to the no confidence motion. He attempted to inject PPP, racist politics into the GTU by issuing that statement. Why did he tell us whether Gahu's accounts were audited? Why didn't he tell us about the other unions? I checked with the Auditor General's office, and I'm going to do a show on that. Gahu's accounts were not audited either. So why are they only picking on the GTU? The fact remains is that they want to break the union, they want to undermine the union, and they're attacking the teachers. And I'm happy that the judge, Justice Kisoon, issued the conservatory orders. Conservatory orders are for to preserve the status quo, ensure that the circumstances remain until a final determination of a matter that's been filed before the court. The court will not issue a conservatory order on a matter that the plaintiffs are likely to lose, right? So right away tells you that the case filed by GTU has merit. And look at it, this is why it has merit. The teachers signed, when Bar Jagde was president, and they had the strike, they said, okay, we can deduct monies, union dues, automatically from the teachers because they didn't authorize us to do that. So they then required every teacher must sign an authorization giving the Ministry of Finance or Education authority to deduct the union dues from their salary. All of a sudden, they've gone back to that tactic. Oh, we will not deduct the money. On what basis? The teachers did not withdraw the authorization. So on what basis you're making this arbitrary decision? The second thing is, the court ruled already that the nurses in Linden must be paid. So there's case law. So what the hell they're going to court arguing? But it shows how nasty and devious they are because they're even appealing that decision to give the nurses their benefit. You just imagine a government is going to the Court of Appeal to get the right to deny nurses their salaries and their benefit. That is the ambition of this government. They want it on the record that we are asking the court for permission to deny nurses their benefits. And now, Anil Nandlal is before the court asking the court for permission to deny teachers their salaries and their benefits. That's how we have to campaign. And going broadly, what I would like to see is teachers in Barbados and Antigua and Trinidad marching down the streets in those countries, rallying in solidarity of the teachers in Guyana. We have to find a way to broaden this struggle in Guyana to make the world more aware of what's going on. For instance, we have the CARICOM Heads of Government Conference going on in Guyana, and nobody is talking about racism, corruption, the denial of the teachers a fair working salary. Nobody. No. I'm talking about in terms of the people in Guyana at the conference or somebody raising it with the heads.
Oh, you mean this?
I saw Gordon Mosley. I saw a journalist doing an interview with Linda Greenfield, the U.S. ambassador, and not once mentioned anything about discrimination, the struggles in Guyana, the politics, nothing. I'm not seeing it anywhere in terms of the formal media. We on social media are raising it, but it's this dichotomy. It's like we're in two realities in Guyana. We in the diaspora and on social media, we are raising awareness, but the people in Guyana can't because they're targeted, they're intimidated, and the government abuses them. And I'm wondering, how do we get past this? How do we, like Mark called for, the people on the ground to start confronting this government, go beyond the police targeting them and harassing them? The other thing is, I see the police blocking teachers from going to the school. The police are the people representing the PPP, not even the government. The police are the PPP representatives fighting back the teachers, putting out a statement that the strike is illegal. What the hell is the Ghana Police Force doing involving themselves in an industrial action? We're not going to court to stop it. We're not doing anything.
Brother Rickford, when we were in Washington at your conference, the conference you organized, the big thing was, where is the evidence? Let the PPP give us the evidence every day. That's what they're doing. The next time you hold your conference, we will have plenty evidence to give to Hakeem Jeffries. Let them do their do. You see, in struggle, right? And action is a reaction. They're not doing it because they want to do it. They're doing it because people are on the move. We may not think what the teachers is doing is enough, but it's enough for now. And then they're going to react. And then other people are going to react. The struggle goes on. Pastor London, over to you.
Thank you. And I must remind Brother Rickford that I'm in Guyana. So I'm here. I'm in no way afraid or intimidated by anything called the PPP. But least in reference to his significance and intellectuality. That's why he can handle your finale the way he does. They both fit in one shoe as far as I'm concerned. But in reference to the response of this administration to what the teachers are doing, the response is clear, and it is typical of the PPP regime. The response is always expected to be or to take a certain course. So when the teachers and the union said, okay, this is what we're going to do, we're going to respond to you, and I applaud them highly, because that GTU is the union that has stood the most over the past 3 years.
Yes.
GAW's PPP, so they always set up to come out there and say, okay, then they make a little noise and they get some money. To me, it's just a tactic to get what they want. But in reference to the GTU, they have taken to the streets very often, demanding what is rightfully theirs. And so the PPP situation, what different from what it was expected to be. But I must say that in this case, the swiftness with which they demonstrated or showed their hand is what got my attention. They weren't cautious about exposing their true nature to anybody. So they showed from the beginning that, okay, number one, they are going to expose themselves. I call it checkmate. Say, okay, if you do not go back to the classroom, we'll cut your pay. The only people you can do that to are people who you know cannot afford to live without a monthly salary. So they've admitted by their action that they know teachers cannot afford to lose 1 month's pay. So instead of saying, if we do this, it'll expose the fact that we know they can live without it. Instead, no, we're going to deliberately shove you down the gutter to prove to you that you can't afford to live without 1 month's salary. That is the nature of the PPP. Secondly, they've shown us that they are in no way, shape, or form prepared to abide by what is lawful. That is the nature of the PPP. They do not respect the laws of Guyana. And I want every Guyana who's on this, hear me tonight, or whatever you're on the replay, hear me carefully. This administration does not respect law, period. I showed my children yesterday the new Demerara Harbor, which as they call it. And they were amazed by how quickly it's being built. But I said to them, I want you all to hear something. This bridge you see here, $286 million US have been signed onto without there being a procurement commission, without there being a board to deal with what you call it, for contractors. I'll remember the name in a minute. But I said, imagine Irfan Ali has refused to establish the necessary legal bodies, and they sign contract because they do not respect law. So in response to the reference to the government's response to this situation, they can only respond in one way, and that is Jack Dio's way. Whenever he is called out or challenged by anybody, he demonstrates what he may be in private. Note I said maybe because I know it is private, but what I see in his behavior, it is always that he will step down to a certain behavior to show that he will do whatever it takes to crush whoever opposes him. So again, I applaud the GTU, and I must say that I'm appalled by the government's or the administration's response, because Joe Hamilton can do nothing, absolutely nothing. He's of no use to anybody in the labor sector, because he can do only what he's dictated to do, and that is to behave like John Deere, reference to just disregard the law and do whatever it takes to crush people.
John Abrams?
Yeah, well, Dr. Hines, a lot of what is being said is exactly on point. But I wanted to draw a parallel between a strike we had only last week or the week before. The workers of Banks DIH came out on strike demanding more money. They were saying no money, no work. But what is the position with that strike today? Right? It didn't last a week.
Yeah.
The workers are back on the job. Now, for me, that is a demonstration. It should be an embarrassment to the government because of the way the private sector has treated and demonstrated to them how you should treat with industrial action. But the PPP is not that. We talked about all the racial dimensions related to their behavior, and that is the key factor. Let me talk about, you're talking about the 4 unions and so on. We have to understand the not only the political connection of the unions, but we have to understand that, I mean, I have had people in Gaisuko working on the estates, and you would know that when the PPP wanted to give the sugar workers a raise or benefits, that they tell the union to call out the workers.
Yes.
And within 2 or 3 days, the workers have struck. They call them in and they settle, they give them what they had planned to give to them. And that has been going on and on and on, right? But whenever a union led by the African community takes a position like that, then we see this response that we are getting from the PPP, right? So that point about keeping us poor is also critical, because poverty is the weapon that the PPP has been using to hold us in check. All right, they believe that once we are poor, that we are not able to last for any significant struggle, particularly with strike. And that is why, as Pastor London said, the first thing that they went to is the food bowl of the teachers, that we are going to cut your pay. All right. And so that order by the court is absolutely important. And I'm hoping that when the decision is made, that teachers will in no way suffer from their salaries being cut by this administration. Jagdi Olodid, I have the video going on my reel where he gave praise to the teachers for striking in 2018, and then they showed how it ended, that teachers didn't lose pay, right? That they were not to lose any benefits at all, and the matter was sent to arbitration. And that is under a government that they continue to condemn, the APNUFC government. So what is it with them that they continue to ignore even outreaches by the union to them, to the Ministry of Labor, to come to the table and to talk?
Mark Benschop, you have been covering this strike nonstop. Early in the morning, you're out there. Late at night, you've put your platforms to the service of this strike. What I want you to do is to put the strike in perspective, because, and I'm hammering away at this because I know there is a tendency among opposition supporters to believe that nothing is being done, you know, because we don't see the big upsurge and thousands of people on the street and so on. We tend to feel that nothing is being done. So when something like the teacher strike is being done, I don't think that we lift it to the heights that it should be lifted at. And I continue to say, this is hard guava season in terms of politics. You're dealing with a post-regime change country. You're dealing with a government in which the global forces are not ready to slap them yet. They will give them a little touch on the wrist. So the government has a sense of security that it will not get a cuff from external forces. You're dealing with the political opposition, understandably. When you're kicked out of government and you didn't even know you get kicked out of government, you're dealing with a political opposition that ain't catch itself yet. In those circumstances, this teacher strike is astronomical, And I don't get the sense that we are saying that. We are still saying that these people need to come out more. What more in the context of what you're doing? Isn't the teacher's action so heartening that it should be lifted up, Mark Benschop?
I can't fault the people for saying that the country should be shut down. And majority of Guyanese have been saying that. Most of them are on social media. They want to see the opposition leadership as well, not just one person, but the leadership out there in full force, because this has become now a political matter. This is not just political, this is survival of the nation. Because if you're going to ostracize the teachers, you're going to demonize them, all manner of things you're going to do to them, and just throw crumbs at 6.5 and tell them to accept it and wait for some other time. It is unacceptable. And so this has become now, in my opinion, mind you, a political struggle. Just like in the earlier days, they can't say that because Coretta McDonald is a member of parliament. What about C. Paul? What about C. Paul Narayan? Isn't he a PBP? Isn't he in parliament? Isn't he the president of the Guyana Agricultural Workers Workers Union? Even when you look back in the days, Burnham was in parliament. He was a union leader. Chetty was in parliament. He was a union leader. Ashton Chase was in parliament. He was a union leader. And let me remind that the PPP is anti-union. They have always been anti-union. The formation of GAU has not been a Jagan's brainchild. This is a brainchild with the collective leadership of the PPP, that was also formed by Forbes Burnham. This is collective leadership in GAU back then. It so happened that Jagan took control and the PPP took control of GAU. And let me just say how anti-union and anti-working class the PPP is. The Enmore Martyr. We never gave a rat's you know what about the Enmore Martyrs. How many of you guys know that the Enmore Martyrs monument was actually resurrected, and that day was identified by the PNC, not the PPP? Enmore Martyrs. Check the history of the PPP. They are anti-union, they are anti-working class, and we are seeing that every single day now. Now back to the other unions, like GPSU. GPSU throws something out there and say, hey, we issue an ultimatum. What is the ultimatum? Just throw a little piece of brick and run back inside your building. And now is the time that the people must head out there. And just like in 1997, I believe it was, when the unions were out there in their numbers to shut the country down, not to shut it in any violent way, but to say enough is enough. There's no democracy in Guyana. There's no freedom of speech in Guyana. And it's surprising that a day when the US ambassador to the UN is visiting Guyana, and not a single person out there protesting, not a single one of them protesting, to say to the ambassador and other visiting dignitaries that all is not well in that country. By now they should know. But we can't sit down and expect Gordon Mosley to fight our battle for us. He may ask a couple of questions. You know what I mean? But our opposition politicians should have been out there in their numbers. But you know what people are more concerned about? Some people, they can pay a couple of people to go out in front of CARICOM headquarters or wherever the convention center, you know, to do what? To protest what's happening in Palestine. I'm not saying that what's happening in Palestine and Israel and so forth we should ignore. We should have a voice because lives are being lost all across. But what is happening in Guyana, the very people who took placard, and probably some of them got paid, and hiding their faces in front of the convention center, protesting the foreign dignitaries there, they're not going to go out there and protest on behalf of this teacher strike. They're not going to show solidarity. They're not going to condemn the atrocities that's happening in Guyana, but they're looking at what's happening in Palestine and Israel and so forth. Mind you, again, I'm not saying people should turn a blind eye at that, but we have a bunch of hypocrites, some of whom we are well aware of, who prefer to sit down behind a keyboard, behind some sort of group, and talk all day, a bunch of nonsense. It's not going to move that country. Writing to Polari Joe and say, oh, meet with me He ignored you guys the first time. Y'all wrote to him a second time. Polari Joe is not going to respond to anything. The regime is not going to respond to anyone unless there is pressure, political pressure, politics. That is what it is. Pressure.
Pastor London, you wanted to say something? Come on in.
Yeah. Hey, please, because I want those who viewing, and I love the fact that you especially, Dr. Hinds, would seek to educate, and that we have to do that to our people. They must understand, as people in Guyana, how the system works. So when we speak to the government, it is not just the PPP. I want to make this as technical as possible. Guyana is not governed by the PPP alone. We have members of parliament. We have a body of governance. So, for example, certain laws going to be in place if 2/3 of the parliament vote in favor of that. So the opposition plays a critical role. We have an official leader of the opposition, and that's a constitutional role Aubrey Norton plays. So if we recognize that the administration, the PPP, respond a certain way in reference to our teachers, then our constitutional officers should respond to say that we recognize that you are attacking a body that's protected by the Constitution. Now remember that parliamentarians are called legislators. They frame laws in parliament. So all of the members of the opposition should be informed by now that the PPP is attacking a constitutional body and attacking our law. The law dictates that you must have collective bargaining. That's the law. If the PPP attacks that, then there has to be a political response to it. So quickly I'm saying here that my view is that the government responded poorly, not just the PPP here. The government must respond whenever there's something happening here. The opposition says, no, you're not going to trample on the law here. We'd step out now and deal with you on the legal front of this. You are attacking the Constitution. And that is what I feel so strongly about. I'm not seeing the legislators of Guyana defending our Constitution. This has gone beyond GTU here now.
You know, the thing to Apostle is the visiting dignitaries, especially the U.S. ambassador to the UN, should have actually had what is called an audience with the opposition to hear their side. That is the level of democracy, not hypocrisy. You can't hop into the country and say you're going to talk to CARICOM and you're going to talk to the installed PPP regime that is doing so much to hurt citizens across the country and ignore the opposition. It is unacceptable. And this is where the opposition should have been able to stand up on the mountaintop and say, hey, we need an audience with you too. Just as what they did with Blinken when he was there in Guyana. For the U.S. ambassador to the UN just hop into the country and ignore the opposition doesn't augur well for democracy. It doesn't at all.
Well, Dr. Hinds, if I might...
Yes, come in, Rickford.
If I might jump, Apostle London, we have to face the fact. The opposition is incompetent, just as incompetent as the government. There are people who in the opposition who are working, but the opposition is incompetent. It's incomprehensibly incompetent to me. I can't reconcile it. I can't. For instance, when David Granger went to address that conference at Pegasus, the PPP took placards in there and disrupted. Why some of those opposition members of parliament who were invited to the CARICOM heads of government conference couldn't go in there with some placard and stand up and say, we demand democracy. We demand that the American government stop dealing with this government the way they are and deal with the reality that we don't have democracy in Guyana. Why can't we have that? Why didn't they issue a press release? I understand, based on my sources in Washington, that there will be a meeting with the Assistant Secretary of State and the opposition. The Assistant Secretary of State is not good for Guyana and the Caribbean and the Western Hemisphere. Every country has problems with him. He's going to be responsible if this Biden administration, he's going to share some of the responsibility about the failures of some of their foreign policy. From the time they learned that Linda Greenfield was going to Guyana, I agree with Mark. The opposition should put out a statement, write the ambassador, write everybody demanding a meeting with her. Why aren't they asking for a meeting with a delegation of the CARICOM heads of government? They're right in the Caribbean. The CARICOM, I'm in touch with some of these heads. They don't even know what's going on. Some of the heads will be happy to meet with the opposition. The opposition is incompetent, incomprehensibly so. They're not providing enough representation for the people.
One of the things the undersecretary, I think they can only do so much. I'm not going to condemn him to say he hasn't done anything or much, But one of the main things with regards to those leaders of CARICOM, they're more concerned about bread and butter for themselves. Guyana is supposedly an oil-rich country. They're more concerned about what piece of oil they could get. What can they get? So they don't want to offend the status quo, so to speak. They want to ride the rhythm, as the guys, the DJs would say. They want to ride the rhythm. To hell with people who have major problems. To hell with the teachers. The regime is violating the teachers. They have no regards for, in terms of a negotiation and bargaining with the teachers and so forth and so on. They are violating every international law according to international labor organizations and all these things. But what the union should have done was to get some of their senior members out of the country in front of the ILO and other places, meeting with these people or coordinating with others in the US and other places to say, look, let's expand this protest. Let's not just confine it to Georgetown, because as of now, it's not just a teacher strike. It is a political struggle right now. Some teachers might not agree, but it is a political struggle. And we have to face reality.
Brothers, I think you all have raised a very important point here. To your last point, Mark, if the teachers say the strike is not political, the teachers have to struggle within the confines of their own consciousness of what they're doing. It is for the rest of us to frame the strike in a particular way. I heard the president of the Teachers Union say that they are going to bury race and bury politics, and I understand that. I am not going to condemn the brother. He has to conduct a strike within the limited confines of trade unionism.
And he has a diverse group of teachers he's dealing with as well.
Yes, right. But I think the broader political thing is for the rest of us, and I think you all have touched on it, and that is the role of the opposition. What is the role of the opposition when you have an industrial crisis of national proportion?
Right.
That is the question for me.
It's your press release and stay quiet.
What is the role of the opposition in an environment where there's an industrial relation struggle in which workers are being beaten up, the law is being trampled upon, racism is being carried out? That's where I think the opposition ought to come in. Let the union bosses direct the strike within their confine of industrial action, industrial relation. Political people are the ones who I think have to politicize the struggle, not the strike. Politicize the struggle, because we are concerned with the struggle. The workers are concerned with strike. They are using strike as a means to an end. The rest of us are seeing, and we have to see the strike as part of the broader struggle against the infringement on the rule of law. And I think that's where the honorable
Dr. Hines, if I might say, and what kind of concerns me with the opposition is that we're not seeing any innovation and ingenuity. We're just seeing this old stale politics. The opposition doesn't have to politicize the strike as in terms of push people. They could take different actions. They could carry the Ministry of Labor to court. They can send their lawyers, take the Ministry of Labor to court, force them to go to the negotiation table. There's so many things that the opposition could do. But and Pastor London said it. And I always say the opposition is part of the government. In Guyana's context,
Rickford, the opposition, first of all, has to understand its role. My biggest criticism of this opposition, it doesn't understand its role because it doesn't understand the moment.
wow.
You see, time moves on, and your principles are constant, but your principles have to adapt to new era. There was a time when the PNC could have avoided race. In this time, you can't avoid race to your peril. I'm not saying that you'll have to talk race 3 years from now, because you talk it today, you highlight it today, so that you don't have to highlight it tomorrow. But if you feel that the same old stale talk that Guyana is one people, one nation, one destiny, and and this and that, and not recognizing that your supporters are being trampled every day because of their color. And you, as their political representative, after all, what role do you play? It's like seeing your supporters being drug in, and you are standing there and saying, I don't want to offend the waves. Because if I offend the waves, I'll offend the environment. Right? And your people are dying. Your people are dying. And I think it is the role of the opposition. I think if the opposition understands its role, it will act better. But I think it's a lack. But anyhow, Dion Abrams, the role of the
opposition is critical to the struggle, because the opposition represents a movement, and the opposition should be able to garner the forces outside of the teaching fraternity that can move this struggle forward. All right. And we are seeing none of that movement. I mean, I always remember Desmond Hoyt as a leader of the PNC, right? When he said, slow fire, move fire. You understand? And this country was basically on its knees.
That's right.
And that is what we need right now. But the vibes, you're not getting it from any corner, right? And that is why what the teachers are doing is so massive, as you said.
Yes.
Because they have overturned a state of dormancy.
Yes.
That has been in this society for too long.
That's right.
All right. The opposition is not playing that role of bucking the making this Jack Dio in particular understand what people's power really represents. And so I am
they're busy fighting each other.
PPP
is not a priority. They're busy fighting each other.
Pass along the teachers. And note I'm saying the teachers are not necessarily the union. Yeah, go ahead, I'm Dion.
They, Pastor London talk about them beating up on the teachers and not having care and concern and all of that. But the care that they're talking about and the lack of care also extends to the children who have to attend school and who are not being taught because the teachers are not there. What they're trying to do is to turn that as a weapon against the teachers, saying that the teachers are the ones who don't care. When they are in fact demonstrating by holding the teachers out there that they ain't concerned about the children, that they don't have a care, that SBAs have to be prepared, that students have exams only about 3 months from now. They are trying to make it look big, and they're flooding the pages. The people, they have a machinery, a PR machinery. So everything that goes up on Facebook, you see the comments. The teachers did this, the teachers that, and it's one set of people making these comments all the time because they're part of the PPP propaganda machinery, trying to turn the thing against. But this entire country, I can tell you that, is with the teachers. Because it's not only the teachers who are suffering, the market woman from whom the teacher has to buy but cannot afford. So their goods have to be left when they go to the market to sell their greens, and they got to sell it at a price that people can't afford. See how much is being dumped every day at border market. People can't buy it. So the economy is affected in every facet. But they don't care about that. They don't care about the children. They don't care about the teachers. They don't care about anybody except themselves. And that is why I was glad when Lincoln said, "You're calling me a relic. You're a thief. You are a thief." Because they're the biggest thieves in this country. And we know that for a fact. But we're doing nothing about it.
Dion Abrams here, teacher, WPA EXCO member. Pastor London, you raised that important question about the role of the opposition, and the opposition is part of government, and what the massiveness. I want to use Dion Storm because I think this teacher strike is massive. This is massive in the context. The teachers have done, they put more people on the street than the opposition parties could. Only the other day, the opposition parties had a rally at Burnham Court, and they couldn't put the number of people there as the teachers have done. And I am not saying that to put a bad commentary on the opposition. I'm saying that to put a good commentary on the teachers. To say that the teachers have touched the soft spot that all of us have been looking and working for. And rather, I think our job now is not to emphasize those who are not on the move, but is to emphasize and celebrate those who are on the move.
Yeah.
Go right ahead, my brother.
Thank you, my brother. We should, and whenever I go out with the teachers, I remind them of the significance of their posture. More so, they're predominantly females.
Yes.
Women, more so young women.
Young women.
They're on the road because they understand here that they have to make a statement to defend themselves, to defend their children, to defend the students, to defend their parents. They are out there recognizing that this struggle in which they found themselves requires courage and strength that goes beyond even what political offices can protect you with. So I cannot take the risk of minimizing the significance of the teacher's role in this struggle and the catalytic nature that it should take.
That's right.
I would not either be irresponsible to say that teachers, you out there, and we should not require of the constitutional body called an opposition. I'm not asking them to join the teachers to do something. We're saying here, opposition, your role is to protect the Constitution. If the PPP attacks the Constitution, then you have to respond immediately.
Yes.
It's not about GTU here. This is an attack on Guyana's Constitution. And if the members of Parliament who are framers of the law, they then have to say, no, we're not coming out here to deal with the teachers. We're dealing with you based on your response to the law and your disregard for the law. So teachers, you stand, but we're going to deal with them enough from a whole new perspective here, which is how they deal with the law. And since you, by extension, are crying out for justice in reference to your working class status and how you should live, then we're going to lend support to you, but not focusing on you. We focus on what they're doing to the law. Now, that will give the opposition a clear role in this situation here. You're not joining the GTU strike. You're dealing with how the PP has handled the law.
Yeah, that's right.
So let me again express with utmost confidence and joy the courage of females and some young men who are out there saying that we understand now that the GTU is the last standing organism in trade unionism.
Yes.
If the GTU folds, Jaglio and all of them would have destroyed trade unionism in this country. I promise you that.
Yes.
That's why teachers have to stand knowing that on your young shoulders, young lady, on your 21-year-old shoulder, stands or rests trade unionism. Not classroom, not school, not building. Trade unionism as we know it in Guyana rests on some young lady's shoulders. And I encourage them and they say, well, we understand that now, so we ain't backing down. And that to me would encourage me to continue to stand with them because they understand that this went beyond GTU. And this is now trade unionism across the board that PPP doesn't want to deal with. So we make them cower, we make them bow, and we make the PPP respect trade unionism again in this country.
Well put, my brother. So well put. Rickford, your closing thoughts, then Dion, and then I come back to Pastor.
Well, I think beyond the opposition, I would call on the public to join the teachers. The teachers mold the nation. And so I think parents should pull their children out of schools, let them join the picket lines, let them march through the city. I believe this government should be brought to its knees and dislodged. I make no apology for saying that. I mean, they're going to write the US government and say I said that, but that's fine. They should be dislodged. The voters should see what these people are doing. They're trying to impose an autocracy and ethnocracy and autocracy on Guyana, and the people must reject it. They are definitely trying to destroy the union. The parents should come out, the teachers should come out, and the other unions should come out and show solidarity. Mark mentioned the ultimatum by the Guyana Public Service Union. I would like to see them bring out the nurses and the other public service who also deserve more than 6.5%. So my call is for the people of Guyana to join the struggle, join in solidarity with the teachers. And I would like to see people flooding the courts with lawsuits whenever they see the government abusing the law. I think it's not enough for us to complain about them abusing the law. Move to the courts. That's what they did when they're in opposition. I would create such a court calendar that they must have to introduce night courts in Guyana. Every day, flood the courts with constitutional motions, challenging the actions of PP government. And that will help to restore some rule of law. I still have faith in some of the judges. This judge in particular has been standing up to the government. You notice he came under assault by the Attorney General, who they believe that they must dominate everything, control everything. He was speaking with such contempt for the judge. I hope the judge could rein him in when he goes back for the next hearing. But all in all, Dr. Hinds, I want to call on the people of Guyana, all of the people of Guyana, to join the teachers, ensure that this strike is successful, because this government is waiting out the teachers. They want to wait for the next 2-3 months when the teachers really would get tired and probably weak. They think they'll become weakened, and they can attack the union and attack who's driving a Mercedes and who's driving a Lexus, while Priya Manichan parade up and down like if she's some ambassador for Gucci and Louis Vuitton. And the poor teachers are struggling.
Mark, I know you have to go to start your program, so let's get your closing thoughts.
Thank you so much. The opposition, of course, they're trying their best under the circumstances. Can they do more? Yes, they can do more. They held meetings with the foreign dignitaries. This is what the general public should know. These meetings ought not to be secret meetings, because while John and Jane Public are of the impression that there is no meetings or whatever, they did meet with Nichols, and these meetings should be made public, at least photographs. Let us see that they are fighting on our behalf and that they are talking.
Did you know whether they took any of the trade unionists with them?
I don't know who they took with them. Sometimes it's always important who are the individuals at those meetings. You have to have an impact. You just can't grab Tom and Jenny and say, "Come, let me take a quick selfie," and that's it.
Or go alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm not going to paint a bad brush altogether on the opposition. Of course, we expect better. We expected better from them. The leader of the opposition went in there ready to fight and everything and this and that. I don't know. I'm not in his seat, but all I can offer my opinion is to say more should be done, more needs to be done, and there needs to be a collective effort in all of this. The teachers' strike is just an eye-opener, so to speak, and the other union leaders need to go out there. They need to call out their flocks. They need to take to the streets. It's not a crime. They got to forget about what the PPP would think about them and who the PPP will plant. We already know the PPP's history is to plant individuals into protest, to block up protests. We know, and we should tell the world, we should remind the world that that is what the PPP is all about. But that should not be the reason why we are not going to, or the opposition should use, not to take to the call for a strike, call for the people to protest. Lots of things happening in the country. You give a foreign company, Qatari, 10 years of tax exemption, 10. But Drupati in Monrepo can't get a little piece of house lot. David from Manchester Village can't get anything. Swarswati from Cromarty Village can't get anything. All the people in Latem and Linden and all over got to suffer as a result of this corrupt installed PPP regime. And guess what? The ordinary working class people are the ones who have to feel the squeeze. It doesn't matter their ethnicity. It doesn't matter their political affiliation. The PPP doesn't care about Guyanese. They do not care about people. Not so long ago, I'm taking back my time because I was cut off on his backstage. I'm taking back my time. Nobody, I ain't gonna take bully. Nah. I'm tired of tech bully all my life. Not tonight. And so that's where we are, Dr. Hines and fellow guests, and also your listeners, Dr. Hines. Dion, I haven't seen in a while. Continue what you guys are doing there on the ground. And same with Apostle Nigel. I know I should have contacted you earlier today. Forgive me. I will very shortly, though.
And thank you very much. And Denise Collison is making a very important point here. She's saying the opposition, the collective opposition, includes the AFC and the WPA, etc. And she's quite correct. And Denise, I want you to know that my criticism is self-criticism. It's not excluding people like myself from the criticism that the opposition has to understand its role. And I have been saying on this program that this is the first time in my following of Guyanese politics in the last 50 years in which the country is in crisis and you don't have an active joint opposition. At no time, going back to the 70s, I mentioned the 4 unions. I mentioned the Committee in Defense of Democracy, the PCD. You cannot wage a struggle like this as a single party. No. You have to have an all opposition.
Doc, as
yes.
Dion and you would note, the other two individuals are very young to remember that. They're youngsters. We are... that in the 70s, they had this collective opposition, the PPP and the WPA.
Yes, that's the point I am making.
You are laughing.
That's the point I'm making. You cannot execute a struggle against a vicious regime with the opposition. You have, even if the joint opposition just got to meet every month and to take stock and put out a statement, we don't have an active joint opposition. And it's a crime. It's a crime. So, Denise, you are correct.
But apart from Iska, what are you guys in the WPA doing about this?
We have publicly and privately, and I'm not tearing tears out of school, publicly and privately implore on the powers that be in the opposition for joint opposition activity. And I want to say here in no uncertain terms, that whenever there has been some joint opposition activity, it's because the WPA has been pushed. We're not part of the APNU, so we are on the outside. But we have constantly been saying in private and public, we have to have a joint opposition. We have been given commitments in that regard, and there have been some feeble steps, but more could be done. I hope that
lots more can be done, Dr. Hines. Lots more. And hopefully soon you guys would move from sitting on the sideline, so to speak, from outside and get back inside. Because remember, you guys pull out. Y'all get back in. We all are needed in this. Get back in.
Dr. Hines, can I make a final point and then I have to go?
Yes.
This is the joint opposition right here.
Well, that's what Calypsonian Brother Valentino would say. He said the Calypsonian is the only opposition in this country. And perhaps the social media
the ordinary people are also part of the. I know Dion looking for you right after you get off the program. So you see what the job about the WPA? You see what the job is.
Mark, Dr. Hines almost said, Mark, I'm doing the questioning here. But he didn't bother to say he was thinking about it.
He's my senior in this regard. I may be senior to him in terms of political experience, but in terms of social media, he's the pioneer, so he's my senior. I always defer to him in this regard. Dion and then Pastor.
Good night, guys. I have to run. Good night. Thanks for having me.
Okay, all right.
Dion.
So I want to go back to this frightening scenario that we're in because the emergence of people like Hitler and Mussolini and so on, we took them for granted when they began their escapades. And this PPP administration, because of their contempt, you see, when you believe that your race is better than another, I mean, it's the same thing with the Israelis and the Palestinians. So we have to be afraid as Black people of what Jack Dio and Nandalali Chatri and them are willing to do and can do in relation to their contempt for the Black people in this country, right? And so we have to be prepared to defend ourselves by any means necessary, because they are fortifying themselves basically to wipe us out in every facet of the way, you know? And this teacher strike is demonstrating clearly how they see us and the contempt that they hold for people who are supposed to be our leaders. And once they're disregarding our leadership, how will they feel about the ordinary man on the ground?
Yes.
It's really, really disquieting. And so this opposition force that we're talking about is absolutely critical to our survival. That's my closing.
Pastor London, your closing thoughts, and please address the whole notion of a broad joint opposition that includes all of the forces that are playing some important role in trying to push this government off the dictatorial road and to open the space for real democratization.
Thank you, Dr. Hines, and again, thanks to you and to the able panelists who have started me this evening. I feel certainly warm and welcome. Let me say that my mind goes to a young lady called Annie. She was out there. She's of Indian descent today. She was standing a mother with 3 sons, little boys, dressed in a uniform, and she was saying that she is out joining the teachers because she understands the importance of her sons receiving instruction, but also the importance of the administration, your role in ensuring that the teachers are okay. And I applaud her highly tonight because another female is showing us that she understands what this is about. And so when we speak to the joint and the collective nature of the opposition in this country, it is warranted more than any other time, because there is a body called the PPP that has formed a coalition with those who are beyond our shores as well.
Yes.
And you asked me to go here, so I'm going here now. So we don't have a collective opposition that's really, in our eyes, functioning the way it should. But we have the opposition of the PPP, along with some members of the USA, some members of CARICOM, and who are clearly showing us that although they are informed and are aware of what's happening in Guyana, they are collating with the PPP to crush those who are not on board with the PPP per se. And so the nature of the opposition in this country now must take on a role that speaks to the fact that although we may not agree with everything we do, we agree with the cause for us to stand together. It must go beyond this, the juvenile nature of politics sometimes. And I'm prepared to do that. And I've reached out the olive branch in many cases. Some people don't know that, to say, listen, I have an issue with how you function, but let's go beyond that now. There is a critical state in this country where all of the voices who understand the cause must be relevant and active. No more press statement and press release all the time. We must be relevant, we must be active, because there's a coalition at work called the PPP, the ABCE nations, and some CARICOM members, and they are working perfectly against those of us who are called lower class, small man, ordinary citizen. And therefore we must take that role as a collective body to fight against those who've now collated to fight against us.
Mark Benschop, 1 minute.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Dr. Hines, and the guest as well, Dion and Apostle and Rickford, who is left, and also, most importantly, your listeners. They are very, very loyal listeners. They are fighters, and I take this time to salute them. And to all of the teachers in the country and the parents and the students, the struggle continues. Be brave, continue to stay out there. We are with you in whatever little way. We are with you. That's my closing remark.
Thank you very much, my brother. Thank you very much, Pastor. Thank you very much, Dion. And thank you all in the audience. And you heard it here tonight. We stand with the teachers. We're not directing the teachers' strike, but we stand with the teachers in a real way, in that we need to mobilize political and other support for what the teachers are doing. What the teachers are doing right now is big, 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 big. And we have to blow it up bigger. The teachers are heroic. They have been able to find that sweet spot that we have been searching for the last 3 years, 3.5 going on to 4 years. And the teachers are conducting their struggle as they must within the context of industrial relations. And let them do that. Do not direct them how they must attack. If they say the strike is bread and butter, then yes, for them it's bread and butter. And let us support them in that regard. Let us not give them language. Let us use our own language to broaden the support for the teachers' struggle. We are not the union bosses. We are the supporters. Let us watch how the government is reacting and pounce on the government. It is the government, as the Clinton people would say, it is the government, stupid. It is the government. The next thing we have heard here tonight is that there is need for a collective opposition. This struggle cannot be carried on by the teachers in their corner and the anti-Exxon people in their corner and the anti-Israeli people in their corner and the race people in their corner and the PNC in their corner and the AFC in their corner and the WPA in their corner. We need to find a way for all of those forces that have grouses with the government to come together under one banner to stand against this runaway train. My brother Dion mentioned Hitler and Mussolini and all the other dictators. They started just as the PPP started. And we found all kinds of ways to talk nice about them. And they eventually became fascists and dictatorships because we did not recognize what we were in the presence of. When 2 years ago we said that this is an apartheid regime, people want us to define what apartheid is rather than looking at what we are talking about today. The PPP is showing how apartheid they are by their policies. We cannot continue as a disjointed opposition. We have to have an opposition movement. An opposition movement. Never in any struggle against a dictatorial regime as one party successfully prosecuted the struggle. Against the apartheid regime, we had all of them. The ANC, the Pan-Africanists, the communists, the Social Democrats all came together under the anti-apartheid movement. We have to have an anti-dictatorial and an anti-racist movement in this country. The racism that we're talking about is not with somebody calling another individual the N-word or the C-word. That's not the racism we're talking about. We're talking about institutional racism. A term, by the way, that was made popular by Professor Charles V. Hamilton, who just died. He wrote that book, a manifesto for the Black Power movement, Black Power, co-authored it with Stokely Carmichael. He died at age 94 2 months ago, and the family just released it today. And he introduced that term, institutional racism. What we are dealing with is institutional racism, where people are using the government and the state to foster their racial views and their racial preferences. I don't care who don't like Indians and who don't like black people and who don't like Amerindians or Chinese and Portuguese in their personal capacity. That's their personal business. But when you are in charge of the government and the state, And you are using that government and that state to foster your individual prejudices. You have moved beyond prejudice to racism. You have infected the institutions of the state and the government with your personal prejudices. And that is what we are fighting against. I don't care who don't like race and who don't like race. That's your business. But you cannot stay silent when a government is using racial prejudice to inform policies. When this government can treat GAWU the same it's treating the teachers union, I am ready to withdraw the charge of apartheid. Because what apartheid means is apart. And they're treating teachers union apart from how they're treating the sugar workers union. They're treating the PSU different from the way they're treating NASI. And that is the apartness, the apartheid. And so we need a broad opposition, a broad collective opposition. And the one thing that we all agree on is that this government is a runaway train that needs to be stopped. And that's all you need in an opposition movement. We will differ in terms of policies. We will differ in terms of emphasis. But the one thing that we all should be agreed on after 3 years and more of the PPP rule is that we have a government that is authoritarian to the bone, that is unaccountable to everybody, including its own supporters. And a government that is prepared to use race as a means of setting up a dictatorship. I don't know if Jaguar is a racist. I'm not in his head. I don't know if Irfan Ali is a racist. I'm not in his head. And I'm not prepared to go into their heads and plan things or try to see things. What I do know is that they're presiding over a government that is practicing open racial discrimination. And all people need to stand up against that. Race is real. Race may be biologically unreal, but it's socially and politically real. Race determines whether you get 6.5% or you get 20.5% raise in your salary. Race determines whether you get a house lot or you don't get a house lot. Race determines whether you get $250,000 cash grant or you get $50,000 cash grant. Race determines where the bridge across the Demerara River starts and ends. Sisters and brothers, race is real. Not because I say so, but because it's a real phenomenon. And this nonsense about rigged elections, I heard they're talking about what Hamilton Green said, and I didn't even want to mention it because it's so nonsensical. So long as you have two ethnic groups, neither of them is a majority, but you have a winner-take-all system, then both of them will want to get a majority. And if you can't get the majority from the other race because the other race don't want you, then you are going to rig. And rigging, therefore, is an equal opportunity beast in Guyana. I hear people say, well, we don't have a majority race anymore. So racism will go. No, because you don't have a majority race, that race that is no longer majority will have to find ways to get a majority to rule. And they're not successful in buying enough votes from the other side. So they have to rig. Rigging is now a staple in Guyana. The 2020 election showed that. It showed that rigging does not have any little corner anymore. In the old days, the Black Party resorted to rigging because they did not have a majority. Today, the Indian party is resorting to rigging because it does not have a majority. That is the logic, brothers and sisters. That is the logic. Rigging does not have a single home in Guyana. There is a temptation to rig because the system says that the majority must govern. And if you don't have a racial majority, you have to manufacture a racial majority. And so therefore the winner take all system has to go in order to stop rigging. You shout Burnham rig, Burnham rig, Burnham rig, and you satisfy yourself. But there's a whole new generation who don't know nothing about Burnham rigging. What they know is about PPP rigging. What they know is about the 48 ballot boxes with no statutory document. What they know is about the 4,000 people who voted at the last election but were not in the country. And so therefore rigging now does not have a single face. It does not have an Indian face or an African face. It has a Guyanese face. And this government is rigging not only election, it's rigging the economy. It's rigging the economy in favor of one race and one party and one group. It's rigging the finances of this country. This government is the biggest rigger. And so don't get me into this whole thing about rigging is a PNC thing. PNC rigged back in the days, dusted and is gone. And the reason that the PNC rigged back then is the reason the PPP is rigging today. Because they want to manufacture a majority that they don't have anymore. Put that in our pipes and smoke it. The law says you have to have a majority. And if you can't get it by fair means, you're going to get it by foul means. If the PPP don't want to be accused of rigging, free up the damn voters list. Get those 200,000 people off the list. Why are you looking at the other side? And the other side is saying, we want the people off the list. And you are saying the people must remain there. And you're calling the other side rigger. You are rigging the damn list. The PPP is rigging the electoral list. At least the PNC is on record as saying we want to get rid of that rigged list. But yet you're watching the PNC and want to call them riggers. The truth must be told. And I think people like myself have the moral responsibility to tell the truth. You know why? Because when the other side rigged, we came out on them and paid the price with our liberty and our lives. And by God, this side is rigging. Rigging every day. And you want to point to Hamilton Green and with some snide remarks, some sarcastic remark Ami was making, and you want to turn that into something. I'm just glad that the newspapers didn't fall for that nonsense. Burnham is dead and gone. And the reason that you are saying Burnham rig, you are doing it 10 times now. 10 times. You're rigging the voters list. You're rigging the GCOM staff. You're rigging the economy. You're rigging the law. Rigging is now commonplace under the PPP regime. I want it to go out loud and clear tonight that the narrative has to change. I'm tired of it. Tired of it. And I have to be tired of it because I stood up against the other side. And by God, I'm going to continue to stand up against this side. Because this side is rigging in a different time. They're rigging in a time of plenty. They're rigging in a time when they have more guns than the other side ever had. They're rigging when the international community is prepared to turn a blind eye to them. And I want to say to my Indian Guyanese brothers and sisters who are out there, I salute you, I salute you, I salute you. Because for me, it's not about joining the PNC or joining the opposition, it's about standing up for justice. Who you vote for is your business. But you're standing up for justice. You're standing up for justice. And I salute those Indian Guyanese teachers. I don't salute them more than the African Guyanese teachers, but I salute them equally. Because the African Guyanese teachers themselves have to overcome fear, overcome poverty. Those little girls in their 20s and 30s, those female teachers, they're coming of age. They're developing their own consciousness now. And consciousness comes out of your own experiences. And we have to give them a chance. Give them a chance to become conscious. And that is why I think that action out there is massive. It's massive. It's massive. You go study any post-regime change country and you check whether they have mass protests. And you will see no. Because the society in post-regime situation becomes almost a dead society. Because you have a government with a hammer beating people every day. And those teachers have shown us the way. And I hope one by one, we will continue to lift them up and to broaden this struggle. Our role as political people is not an industrial relations role. Our role is a political role. Don't interfere with the teachers running off the strike. Support them. Support them. Support them. Teachers, support them. Parents, support them. Students, support them. Because in supporting them, you're supporting yourself. 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, when the history of this time is being written, you will understand the serious blow for freedom that you're striking now. I can't help when I say to our brothers and sisters, I know how frustrated you are, but don't condemn. Lift them up. 6,000 teachers are out. Bring out another 1,000 in the next week. Let us work with them. Let us work with them. Let us work with them. We come in peace tonight, and we will leave in peace. But we leave with our words blowing in the wind so that all can hear and all can see. The poet said, you got to see with the eyes of the people. You got to hear with the ears of the people. You got to think with the minds of the people. You got to march with the feet of the people. And you got to listen to the people. Those who want us to go and manufacture some struggle from the 1970s and bring it to today, they're living in La La Land. The 1970s are gone. Our ideals of the 1970s remain. But we have to bend our ideas to the present. To the present. Today, the average citizen is driving a motor car. In the 70s, citizens hardly drove a motor car. Times have changed. But we have to put that change in perspective. Times have changed, but we have to put it in perspective. And we cannot pretend that we are living in an unchanging situation. There was dictatorship in the 70s, and there's dictatorship today. But the dictatorship today is more cruel, 10 times more cruel than the dictatorship of the 1970s. And we have to put a stop to it. We have to find creative ways, as we do every day. Every day we are finding creative ways of confronting this wicked government. There are individuals who are aligned to this government who I call my friends. And I don't believe they're wicked. And I don't believe that they support wickedness. But those who are controlling the commanding heights of this government, they are on a road. And that is why I said, in 2020, when the impasse was there, I warned against giving the government to one party. I said it was a time to get both parties to sit down and to agree, since both of them catch one another thieving. All that happened in 2020 is that the PPP said that no, they see the PNC attempting to thief. And the PNC said, oh, we attempting to thief? We gonna skin you up and show that you thief. You didn't attempt to thief, you thief. So one side accused the other side of attempting to thief, and the other side said, I'm gonna skin you up now. You an attempt to thief, you thief. And I said at that time, two thieves made God laugh. But what two thieves could do is say, well, all right, let's sit down now and work out a system so that we don't have to thief no more. So that we don't have to thief no more. But the PPP did not want that. And some of our comrades aided and abetted the PPP to take office. And now the PPP giving even them the licks of Lisbon. Some of them are criticizing the PPP on oil, on Exxon, but they're not criticizing the PPP on human rights. They're not criticizing the PPP on the rule of law. And they're not understanding that the PPP is behaving that way towards Exxon because they don't respect the rule of law. They don't respect the rule of law. And if they don't respect the rule of law for their own people, they're not going to respect it for Exxon. And so a joint collective opposition is needed urgently. I'm sending that public notice out to Mr. Norton because he has the key in his hands. He's the leader of the largest party. And he has to lead the way to a joint opposition. The rest of us don't want to seem as though we are begging to be part of something. But we are saying our experience has taught us that you cannot wage a struggle without a joint opposition. A struggle against a wicked dictatorial regime. Over to you, Mr. Norton. You're not hearing this for the first time from me. I've said it before publicly and privately. That one of the ways is a joint opposition. And if we had a joint opposition, we would have been strategizing how to build on what the teachers have started. All hail to the teachers. All praise to the teachers. They have led the way. They are our heroes and sheroes. And they're doing it with little consciousness. They're doing it with consciousness as workers, as teachers, who go into that classroom every day and out of acts of love, contribute to saving our country. And it is that consciousness that they have taken into the ranks of strikes, of the striking workers. We stand with them. Tomorrow, they come again, and we come again. I am not talking with water in my mouth. Very plain for us to see. Tomorrow night, we're expecting, what are we expecting tomorrow night? I think I'm expecting Mr. Roysdale Ford to be here tomorrow night. At least he was invited. I hope he's going to show up. Tomorrow night, come back, come back, come back, come back. Love, as always.